Welcome to episode 3 of Decomposing Messiaen, a series of videos where we are working through Olivier Messiaen's textbook, The Technique of My Musical Language. I'm particularly excited about the episode today because we're really going to get into some specifics of rhythmic techniques. The previous couple of episodes have been important to lay some foundation, both in terms of what Messiaen wanted to accomplish with the book, and then some very important concepts that we needed to get through to start with, ideas that are going to frame the discussion for the rest of the book. We talked about retrogradability, non-retrogradability, modes of limited transposition, and we also talked about ametricality, the idea of meter as the unique apportionment of small pulses, different from syncopation, different from polyrhythm, the idea that you can get this swaying sensation of rhythm repeated and altered. And the chapters 3 and 4 are the first introduction to some of the ways that meter can be altered within the ametrical patterns. So chapter 3, the title is Rhythms with Added Value, and chapter 4 is Augmented or Diminished Rhythms. And between the two of those, we get some very basic but important mechanisms for taking a rhythmic pattern and manipulating it in a coherent way that can evolve, unfold, and dynamically develop throughout a piece. So, I'm also excited about this episode because there's a lot at the piano, and hopefully I don't fuck that up. So what is an added value? Messiaen says it is a short value added to any rhythm whatsoever, whether by a note or by a rest or by the dot. It can be added to any rhythm whatsoever, and it really is the center of ametricality. So to introduce the idea, Messiaen gives us examples 6, 7, 8, and 9. 6 is a basic pattern, and then 7, 8, and 9 represent those three ways of augmenting it. So if you look at pattern 6, very simple. I'm going to try and do my two noise rhythm again. I noticed when I was editing the last chapter that I did this, it was just two thumps. So I'm going to try and do this. Right, and so those will be my two notes, hopefully more easily distinguishable, and that's just to give a little bit of interest instead of me clapping it. So the bass rhythm in 6 can be counted in eighth notes, right? 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6. I do that again. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now, example 7, where there's a cross in the score, he's adding a note. This is the first rhythm, the first addition. So I'm going to count it in actually quick fours, right? 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 5 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 3 4. Or the other way, 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. Right? So from 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 to 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2. So then the second measure of the 6th example, right, where now we just have 4 eighth notes. 1 2 3 4. Even I can do that without messing it up. Now at the plus, he's adding a rest. So again, in fast fours, it would be 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Now it's 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 4. Right? And if I repeat it, 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 da 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 da. So it goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, da, 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 da. Very basic, but these are important ideas of addition of rhythm to the pattern. And then the ninth example takes the third measure and adds a dot. Adds a dot to the last eighth note. So the original is 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Da 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 da. So now he's going da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. Now he's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1 da da da. So I'm belaboring that because this idea of addition to an existing rhythm is the fundamental way that Messiaen manipulates a rhythmic pattern within the meter. So it's worth going over. So now he does say here, in practice, one will rarely hear the simple pattern before addition of the added value. The rhythmic pattern will almost always be immediately provided with the added value. But you can see how it would be interesting to state something and then evolve it in one of those mechanisms, adding a dot somewhere, and then returning back to it. So, some examples. Paragraph 2 of chapter 3. The rhythm is absolutely free, he says, but that doesn't mean that it has no beat or pulse. So let's look at this example. The way that Messiaen describes it. The first two measures use a rhythm of 5/8 notes plus a 16th note. Right? So if you look at the example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra. And that the cross over the note is a convention he follows throughout this book to show the alteration of the rhythm. The scintillating sonority of the harmonics of the plan jeu, which is an organ stop. So this was a piece for organ, accentuates the upper staff. I'm going to play the left hand on its own first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank goodness digital is cheap, right? If I was trying to do that on film, I'd have just cost $1,000 worth of film. So he described that first measure as 5/8 notes plus a 16th note, which is true, but I like to think of it as 11 16th notes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But that third measure is really then 27 16th notes, right? It's easy to look at the music here and think that you should be feeling like a tuplet, like a triplet feel, but it's not that, right? It's units of related pulses modified. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 26, 27. It's hard to say numbers that fast, so it's 3 sets of 9. Right? If the first measure is 1 set of 11, you could think of the third measure as 3 sets of 9. It's what I mean about time signatures really being kind of irrelevant in this. And then the last measure is really great with the, what is it? It ends on a honkin' great big octave. Messiaen describes the next example as having the same character, also an organ piece. So with that added note, one way of looking at that first measure is that you have two sets of 5/16 notes, followed by a set of 6, followed by a set of 7. And I'm going to play the left hand. I'll play the left hand. It's a little easier to hear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see how this starts to fit together with this very basic idea. Here, we're really just seeing the addition of a note, and how even that simple process can generate scintillating music. The word that he uses, harmonically, also applies to the rhythm. It's got a real sway to it. In fact, what Messiaen describes it as, he describes it as the irresistible movement of steel, which is a quote from the preface of his Quartet for the End of Time. And then he says these examples cannot give an example of that granite. You really need to hear the whole process. But it is a model of the use of added values. Now this one's going to test my reading abilities because there are 3 staves on it. So example 13 is interesting, right? You have A, B, and C. A is 1, 2, 3. Where the G sharp is crossed, he considers that an additional note. And then B in the first statement is E, F sharp, E, and then C is the C section is D, D sharp, E. Then the second statement of that, right, from the end of the third measure, A is the same. But B now is not augmented. But the C gesture is augmented here now. So in the first statement, C is just... In the second statement, it's... and then in the third statement, B and C are further switched around. So you can see how with each of the statements of those small cells, A, B, and C, there are these particulate additions to the small cell, and that's what generates the entire melodic structure. All right, last time. All right, that was almost okay. Let's try one more time. One more time. Okay, that's satisfactory, but I'm going to try one more time and not be quite so ponderous. The Messiaen highlights that these added values create small groups of 5, 7, 11, and 13, indicating his preference for those groupings that naturally have kind of a built-in ametricality to them. And then the final example in this first paragraph from the 3rd chapter, 13, example 13, is the clarinet solo from the Quartet for the End of Time. I'm going to play the first couple of lines. example actually gives a good segue into the third paragraph, the idea of rhythmic preparations and descents, which is an idea that gets a lot more play later in the book, speaking about melodic gesture of preparation, accent, and descent within the shape of the melody. But within the context of rhythm and meter, you want the sharpness of the added note to highlight the gesture of the shape, and you can hear that in the clarinet music there, particularly on the descent. Messiaen says there is an evident analogy between melodic upbeats and terminations on the one hand and rhythmic preparations and descents on the other. The added value can change considerably the aspect of the last. And the example he gives, the rhythmic preparations elongated by added values in example 13. Things like this. The elongation of those notes in what he would call the rhythmic descent is very powerful. Again, we're going to spend a lot more time on melodic shape later in the chapter, but he's bringing it up here as an example of what drives, what's the logic or the impetus behind how you would use these techniques. If we have the technique of addition and augmentation, when would we use it? So the next example might help clarify some of that. He's actually labeled A as the accent, B as the descent, and C as the preparation. And you can see that the added note is in the C. So I'll start with the right hand, A, and then B. And then C, here's the cross note. Again. Preparation to then a restatement of A and B. And then example 15 is even clearer here, where you have A is accelerated and then B is retarded by the added value at the crosses. Same shape, right? So the same shape, but with A it's and then there's a series of melodic examples where he's really talking about the accentuation of the descent. And I think the useful examples here are 18 and 19, because here he shows what would have happened without the augmentation, which is actually 19. And what he's doing with example 18 and 19 is showing that the full augmentation at the cross, the addition of the note. 18 and 19 are interesting. So here's 18. So 18 is really a pattern of 2 quarter notes, 2 eighth notes, and 1 16th, right? So if he was going to follow that same pattern in the final measure, he notes that it would have ended with a very short gesture. By augmenting that, he allows it to have what he calls force, grandeur, and serenity. He says this theme, which is completely a descent, would normally have been obliged to finish thus. It would have lost force, grandeur, and serenity. And so the augmentation at the end there is part of his cadential fervor. So that is chapter 3. Chapter 4 is augmented or diminished rhythms. You can think of augmentation almost like multiplication. If chapter 3 is about addition, you have a series of notes and you add in a note, you insert something. Augmentation is really like the multiplication. If you have a series of notes and you apply the same factor to all of them, you've augmented it or diminished it if it's a fraction. Messiaen begins by mentioning Bach. J.S. Bach practiced the canon by augmentation or diminution. In it, the values of the proposed theme are generally doubled or diminished by half. We ourselves shall have the statement of the rhythm followed by its immediate augmentation or diminution, and according to more or less complex forms. So example 20 is very simple, where section A has a total value of 5/16 notes. B has a total value of 5/8 notes. And then C at the end, which has a value of 5/4 notes. Counting out the 16th notes, the fours, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. You can also augment with a dot. So for example, in example 21, the difference between A and B is that the values in B have all been dotted. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then he has a table, and we all love tables. The table appeared initially in the same preface to the Quartet for the End of Time that he referenced when he was talking about addition. In fact, these two chapters are an expansion of that preface. So in the table you have two measures. You have the original meter, and then you have the augmented. And you can state these as almost as an algorithm. So in the first case, you are augmenting by a quarter of the value. So the first note is a half note, so a quarter of that is an eighth note, and you can see that that is what is extended by. And the second note is a quarter note, and a quarter of that is a 16th note. So a little cheat sheet. It's got diminution as well, which is really the reverse of the augmentation. You can see that if you were to take the end result of the augmentation by a quarter of the value and diminish by a fifth of the value, you'll arrive at the same original value. So this cheat sheet together does a lot of the math for you. Now, it's interesting to wrap up chapter 4 here. Inexact augmentations. What he says here is, with very inexact augmentations or diminutions, one arrives at making rhythmic variants rather than augmentations or diminutions. And he uses the word striking. Here are some examples of more striking inexact augmentations. So a striking inexact augmentation is really a variant rather than an augmentation or diminution. So example 25 is a good example here. If you were to be exact rather than striking, your exact augmentation would end up with an eighth note and a dotted eighth note, and then you would have a quarter note and a dotted quarter note. But clearly, for the cadential nature of the gesture, extends the last note. It's an inexact but striking augmentation. In example 26, the reverse happens. The augmentation that you would expect doesn't occur. So you have two quarter notes in the first two chords, and then a dotted quarter note followed by a regular quarter note. You don't have the full augmentation. And then similarly in the second measure, where your first chord is now a half note, you've got an added note, and then the final chord, instead of being a full half note, is a dotted quarter note. So even with the addition of the extra note, you've lost a 16th note along the way there. So I have always liked that table of augmentation and diminution. It's a technique that I've used often in my own writing, extending back even to when I was a young student. I really like that. It's almost like a mechanical dance of sorts that happens when there's a gradually increasing pendulum that starts very slowly and then incrementally becomes faster. When I was writing music in MIDI, it was easy to do that. It's difficult to play by humans, but it's easy to do with MIDI note values because you just have to do the math. You start off with a long note and then you gradually reduce it, add it all up, and then you can create a score. And I did that for a couple of pieces. I would make some compromises to make it intuitive to play, but I really liked that sense of overlapping. More recently, I've spent time working with modular synthesis, and what I've got here in front of me is the Make Noise No Coast. This semi-modular device actually creates a really nice pendulum swing where the rate of change of the envelope that's triggering the sound can in turn be modulated. And then when it's dialed in, you can just kind of leave it be. So I recognize this. It was that melodic exercise from the introduction, where I applied the alternation of rhythmic cells to create that ametrical piece. But this is very exact. So what I'm going to do is, this is my melody here. I'm going to take these notes here, and then I'm going to take these notes here, and I'm going to work on them through augmentation and diminution. The rest of the melody I'll keep the same, but I'm going to work on each of these cells differently. Was my F sharp, and then D, G with the dot, and then high G like that. Now, what I'm going to do is multiply each of these notes by 2. Except this last note, I'm going to be inexact. And then I'm going to repeat that. But you know what? In my repetition, I'm going to be inexact here. I'm going to give the full expected value to the last note, but I'm going to cut short the expectation there. And then I'm going to restate the original. Then I'm going to go back to the first example, and I'm going to keep that the same. Remember, we had 5s and 7s alternating. And then, for this third phrase here now, I'm going to state it. See, I've got my F sharp here now, where we're at in the original cycle. I'm starting with the F sharp again, but I'm starting as a 5 instead of a 1. This isn't a G sharp, it's a G natural. See? That wouldn't happen if I'd scripted this. And then I'm going to add in a note. And another one here. 16th note both times. I'm going to do that again. And then I'm just going to wrap up with the end, but I'm going to make sure that I have a nice grave descent. So I'm going to make these notes longer. That was a dotted eighth. I'm just going to make them all half notes. So you can compare the original, particularly this last measure here. I like accentuating that line there by making these all a little bit longer. All right, and so now to play, I still have that nice really nice harmony, and in the later chapters I'll use the harmony that's latent in that melody and apply some of the modes of limited transposition to get chords underneath it. For now, I'm going to keep it as a melody. So